Welcome to the X Zone, everyone. I am Rob McConnell, and to all our members of the X Zone Nation who have little kids coming to their door, decked out in all these different costumes, and even if you're out with your own kids listening to us on satellite or on your radio, happy Halloween. If you'd like to send us an email, xzone at xzoneradiotv.com, on all social media sites, Xzone Radio TV. And for all the programming we have available for you 24/7, 365 on the X Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net, and on the X Zone TV channel, which is channel 21 on Simul TV, simultv.com. X Zone Nation, my first guest tonight is Derek Tyler, and he is an author, researcher, and alien and military abductee. He's performed hardcore research on the alien agenda conspiracy. He has had private conversations with insiders who spent their careers working in black ops and has interviewed over 3,000 abductees. On Facebook, you can find out all about Derek at facebook.com/official Derek Tyler. And Derek, welcome to the X Zone.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Where did your interest in aliens, alien abductees, as well as the alien agenda come from?
Well, I had quite a spectacular sighting back in 1984, and it lasted for 42 minutes. You know, the sightings usually only last for seconds or a couple minutes at the most, but this one, the craft was very large, brightly lit up, and it was hovering just a couple feet off the ground right beside a specialized hospital facility near where I lived. And I watched it for about 20 minutes, and then a pair of F-16s came streaking in from Fairchild Air Force Base, and they started buzzing this thing very aggressively. They didn't shoot at it, but they were coming within just a few feet of it time and time again, and they continued to do that for 22 minutes. I was timing it on my watch, and the craft just ignored them, and then it rose just a little bit in the air, enough to top a small hill that was behind the hospital, and went out of sight. I couldn't see what was underneath the craft because they were up on the top of a hill, but there were some trees planted below it, and the top of the trees were obscuring my view of what was taken into the craft or what came out of the craft, so I couldn't know for sure. But once you see something like that, nobody can tell you that aliens aren't here anymore. All my hair stood up on my whole body the whole time that I was watching it. And this was about 185 miles inland from the west coast. So there was nothing else that it could have been. And that's what really lit my fire, I guess. Nothing was the same after that.
Did anybody else see the UFO, or was it reported in the media?
It wasn't reported in the media. I assume that other people must have seen it, but I never heard anyone talk about it. I tried to call the sheriff. They hung up on me. I tried to call the local newspaper. They hung up on me. And my mom has a cousin that worked at that hospital facility as a seamstress, but she wasn't there at the time. But I asked her, next time I saw her, I asked her about that. And she said, well, people inside said that something happened that night, but they won't tell me what it was.
Can you
so I don't know how many saw it. It was easy to see and hard to miss. So somebody must have seen it.
Can you describe it to us?
Yeah, it was a disc shaped like a magnifying glass lens, double convex disc, and it had a band of lights around the center of it. They were multicolored. There were 3 lights of a color, and then it would change color. They had yellow, green, blue, and red, and the lights were alternating colors in a way which made it appear like the band of lights was spinning around the craft, like it was actually moving around the craft, but it was really just the lights turning color in sequence. And then all over the surface of the craft, there were at random spots, and what appeared to be random spots and times, there were what looked like flash bulbs popping off. And when the F-16s came in, I could get a better judgment of its size. It was about its diameter was about twice the length of an F-16, and it was about 3 times the height, including the F-16's cockpit.
Was it making any noise?
No, dead silent. And I've been looking, I figured with all the UFO photos that have been taken, it should be easy to find a match to this in the database. Right, yeah. I've looked all over since 1984, and the only match I've ever been able to find came from an ancient Egyptian temple. It's an exact match, and standing outside the craft that they drew on this temple are two grays. And last summer, someone accidentally photographed. There's a big mountain nearby called Mount Adams, which is a giant dormant volcano, and someone photographed an entrance in this mountain that looked like solid rock opening up to let spacecraft come in and out. They've got a base inside that mountain. It's on an Indian reservation, and the Indians consider it to be a holy mountain, so they don't let anyone go on that mountain. I've lived in that area. Well, I grew up there, and I've only ever met one person that's been on the mountain at all.
Why do you think these craft are here? Now, I understand that you believe it's extraterrestrial, and this is easy to understand. But is it possible that this is something that was developed here and that's a black op?
No.
Really?
No way. At the time, we didn't have any tech that could even approach this. We've got very advanced tech now, but we got most of it from the aliens. And there are multiple races of aliens that the government knows about. And I have a friend who was he retired from the Air Force as a brigadier general, and he spent his whole career in black ops. And he sat me down and gave me a couple military-style briefings in private, about aliens, and he had worked with them as part of his job sometimes. He'd personally met them and been in meetings with some aliens, and he was serious as a heart attack.
Why do you think they're here?
Well, there's lots of reasons they're here, and there's lots of different types of aliens, and they all have their own interests and their own agenda. Some of them seem to be friendly to us, but many of them do not seem to be friendly. I would say the majority of them do not seem to be here to be our friends. They come for resources. They come for human DNA, which is valuable to them. They seem to use DNA as a form of currency because it's the stuff of life itself, and many of the aliens are extremely advanced genetic engineers, and they can create hybrids, they can create human clones, they can take human slaves, and they do all those things, and our military does those same things too.
Why do you think there's this cover-up, this conspiracy to suppress the information that the aliens are here?
Well, there's a lot of reasons, really. One of them is that the subject of alien contact is not for the faint of heart. They're not warm and fuzzy. There are friendly aliens, but they don't control this zone of space. The hostile aliens are firmly in control, and the more you learn about alien contact, the scarier it gets, because we are basically surrounded by aliens who don't have our best interests at heart. They can act like psychic vampires and steal our energy. They can occupy our bodies like this old story of demonic possession. They can actually do that. They can travel through time. They can abduct us and use our genetic material for their own purposes. Some of them consume either humans or human blood, and we apparently make pretty good slaves too. There are lots of reasons that they come here.
How do we know that there is, in fact, these aliens here, and this just isn't an internet myth?
Well, there's plenty of evidence if you're willing to look at it.
I'm willing to listen to it.
There are, for instance, there are rock paintings and cave drawings which clearly show alien spacecraft and the Greys and other types of aliens too, which are up to 7,000 years old, and they're from all over the world. There are Mayan artifacts. There are Aborigine cave drawings. There's what's clearly a man in a bipedal creature in a spacesuit, which was found in Kiev, Russia, which is 5,000 years old, and there's really no other explanation for those things. There's a matter of fact, as I said, the only exact match for the craft that I saw was found on an ancient Egyptian temple, and it's an exact match, and it has Greys standing right outside of it.
All right, Derek, please stand by. You and I have to take our first break. And Exo Nation, Derek Tyler is our special guest this hour. On Facebook, www.facebook.com/official Derek Tyler. Derek and I will be back on the other side of this break as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I'm Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Exonation, Derek Tyler is our guest this hour. www.facebook.com/official Derek Tyler, and that's DEREKTYLER. So once again, facebook.com/official Derek Tyler. After seeing this UFO, and what year was that in, Derek?
That was in the summer of 1984.
How did that change your life?
Well, I never again had to wonder whether or not they were really here.
Mm-hmm.
And I never again had to wonder whether or not our government knew about it. And I also knew for sure that the government considered at least some of them to be unwelcome visitors. And I mean, the F-16s didn't fire at it, but they were clearly locked on it and ready to fire at it. They probably would have just cost them a couple of F-16s if they'd have tried, I assume. But they clearly were angry, and it wasn't supposed to be there where it was. And it's not many answers, but it's a good starting place, and some people can go a whole lifetime without knowing those things for sure.
Now, prior to your sighting going back to 1984, did you have an interest in UFOs?
Yeah, I had a couple of other sightings. The first one was when I was, I guess, probably 7 years old.
Right.
But none of them were as spectacular as that one. I knew, even as I was looking at it, that this was going to be the sighting of my lifetime, and it was.
During your sighting in 1984, did you feel as if you were being communicated with, or there was an attempt to communicate with you?
No, I wasn't that close to it. I was probably a half a mile away, but it was a clear summer night, and I could see it completely clearly. I was on the top of a hill that was adjacent to the hill that the hospital was on, so I wasn't close enough to be a part of the action, so to speak.
Prior to going to that hill, were you on that hill for a specific reason? Were you drawn to that hill at that night at that time?
No, I was out in my parents' yard.
Oh, I see.
And I'd gone out there to. We were supposed to be able to see the northern lights, which is a rare thing around these parts in central Washington. We were supposed to be able to see the northern lights that night, which I don't think we ever really could see them. But I was out in the yard just to see. It was just as it was turning dark, and that's just happened to be. They're in the same town as this hospital, and they didn't live far from it. And I saw this thing come over the hill, and all the hair on my arms and my head just stood straight on end, and I knew that what I was seeing wasn't from this world.
And it changed your life forever?
Sure, because after that I wanted to learn everything about them that I could. And I was apparently already an abductee at the time, but I didn't realize it. And I didn't have any memories of it. And I was probably maybe 40 years old when I first started getting abduction memories. I wrote about those in the first book that I released, which is called Alien Contacts: The Difficult Truth. And it has very detailed accounts of what I remember of my abductions. And I had already interviewed and spoken with literally thousands of other abductees over the years, but I never thought that I would be one of them. It's a club nobody wants to be a member of, believe me.
So how did you get total recall of these memories? Was it regression hypnosis that you underwent?
No, I don't have total recall of them. They try to delete your memories, of course, as I'm sure you know, but it's not always an exact science, and sometimes they don't completely delete them. And I seem to have a habit for some reason of waking up as soon as they return me back to my bed. And when you wake up, then the memories can sometimes be grasped out of your mind. You can sometimes still remember what just happened, or at least much of it. And I would write them down. And if you wait until morning, they'll be gone.
Why do you think that you are getting abducted by these ETs?
Well, I think there's lots of reasons they abduct people, but
no, I mean you specifically.
Well, I have things about my genetics that they like. I asked the Lord for six-pack abs and Jimmy Page's 1975 hair, but instead I got brains. Like, that's going to help me, right? So they like my skill set. I have high intelligence. I have high creativity, problem-solving ability. I have almost photographic memory, and these are what they consider to be primary survival characteristics. And it's what they look for. There's some other things such as freedom from family history of genetically transmitted disease tendencies like diabetes and cancer and heart failure, but they can't almost ever find all those things in one person. They find some of them, and then they use that DNA for hybridizing purposes, and they match it up, and 2 or 3 generations down the road, they will have, in theory, put all the tendencies that they want into one product.
How many times do you believe you have been abducted?
Well, it's a lot.
Yes,
At one
sir.
point, I was getting abducted as many as 3 times a week, and it's exhausting. Let me tell you, you try everything you can think of to get it to stop, but nothing works. The first thing you try to do is not sleep. It occurs to you that if you can just stay awake all night, it might stop them from coming back and taking you, but it doesn't work that way because they can force you to go to sleep when they want to. But over time, you become exhausted from trying, and you become shell-shocked and paranoid. Right now I've still got PTSD where I'm very easily startled at loud noises and stuff. I'll jump, just a reflex action, but I never used to before that. And it's a very difficult thing because there's no support system. There's nobody to talk to about it. I was lucky because I'd already interviewed so many abductees that I knew what was happening to me immediately. I didn't have to worry if I was going crazy or anything. I just knew. My story was much like theirs.
Okay, can you tell when you're being abducted? Or when you are going to be abducted? Do you get a hint? Do you get a premonition? And if so, how does it happen?
You do get a feeling after a while for it. It's hard to describe, but somehow the it's like the electricity in the air changes somehow. It's like the air becomes charged around you in your home, let's say, and it can happen 6 or 8 hours before an abduction actually takes place. But somehow you just get a feeling that they're going to be coming, and many times I would be awake at night, and then all of a sudden I would just be hit by overwhelming waves of tiredness, so strong that I would be asleep within 5 minutes, no matter what I tried to do. No matter where I was, I'd be asleep, and that's when they would come.
How does this affect your family when you're abducted? Are they aware that that dad or Mr. or is your wife aware that you're being taken out of the house in the middle of the night?
Well, I'm still single so far,
Okay.
so I was living by myself,
All
and
right.
so it didn't have any effect like that.
Okay.
But they can do it, and the military has this ability to. They have the ability to do it in such a way that it will appear as though you were never taken at all. They actually have the ability to travel through time, which is something I don't know if I'd have believed it if someone would have told me that, but I've seen it myself. They've done it to me at least 4 occasions, and every time it was for a reason I wouldn't have thought of. But one of the times that they did it was that I can remember was they returned me to my bedroom about 30 seconds before they'd actually taken me, and I could see my future body was laying on the bed asleep, and 2 gray aliens floated me up over the top of my body that was on the bed. It was a little bit out of time phase with me, and they dropped me down into it. We were occupying the same space at the same time, which they say can't be done. There was no sense of contact. A few seconds ticked by. I merged with that body. I woke up like I'd been sleeping, and no time had passed on the clock. So if someone had been sleeping beside me, they'd have thought I was never taken at all.
Do you have any pets at home that might be able to detect any strangeness that could, act as a warning for you?
I didn't at the time, but I've learned that the gray aliens detest house cats for some
really?
reason. They despise house cats. So if you think you're an abductee, get yourself a couple cats. It might not help. It probably won't help, but it's worth trying.
Now let me ask you: are the gray aliens that people talk about, are they the good guys or the bad guys?
The gray aliens, the classic ETs that we normally think of, are they are like cyborgs. They're genetically engineered organisms that are they are slaves.
Okay.
They were basically an experiment in creating artificial life performed by the Draconians, the reptilian race, and they were considered to be a complete failure, and they were relegated to slavery. They do the reptilians' dirty work for them, basically. They have an IQ of about 80, according to my friend in the Air Force. He said they're terrible pilots. Most of the UFO crashes that we find, he said, are results of pilot error on the part of the Greys.
So,
They can be taught to do repetitive tasks such as occur during abductions.
so would it be safe to say that they're the morons of the galaxy?
Well, we're the morons of the galaxy, but they're a little bit dumber than us, yeah, I guess. But they're not a naturally occurring life form. They're created in vats, like clones, and they're completely psychic. They don't react to. They don't make decisions individually very well. They don't react to surprises very well. So they can often, if you can think of a way to surprise them, they'll just stand there for a few seconds while they're telepathically asking whoever their controller is, for instructions on what to do. The trouble is, they neutralize you before they come into the house. I was never.
Derek, I've got to take my news break.
Sorry.
Please stand by. Nice talking to you. Derek Tyler is our guest this hour, Exonation. Facebook.com/official Derek Tyler. This is the Exxon. I am Rob McConnell, and we'll continue our conversation with Derek Tyler on the other side of this news break. Don't go away. Exonation, Derek Tyler is our guest this hour. His website is facebook.com/official Derek Tyler. Derek, is it the entire government that knows about the existence of extraterrestrial, or is this one of these cases where it's not out there, but only a select few within the government actually know what's going on?
Yeah, it's the information is very highly restricted. They had to invent new security classifications that were higher than they used for the Manhattan Project, and basically people are only told as much as they need to know to be able to do their job and no more. For instance, the President of the United States has automatically, when he comes into office, he's given a security clearance, which is considered to be 16 levels above top secret, compartmented, code word, safeguarded levels. But there are 32 levels that exist, and that's where all the good alien stuff is kept, of course. So the President does not have access to the full scope of what is going on with the aliens. The military's attitude is the President will only be here for a few more years and he'll never give another order again. But when he's gone, the military will remain and the aliens will remain. And we're not going to take the chance of some do-gooder like Jimmy Carter coming in and canceling our projects. So they just don't tell him about them. And the amount of money which has been spent on these alien projects is absolutely mind-bending. It's probably several times the total of our national debt.
So,
and it's all taken out of our budget.
Why do we need to spend money on this project?
Well, I'm sure you've heard of the system of bases and tunnels that exist under the ground all throughout this country.
Yes, I've heard about them.
That has already cost $15 billion plus. We have a secret space program that has nothing to do with NASA, and it is out of control. It's what they call breakaway civilizations, but we're financing them. And they have established, with the aliens' permission, they've established bases on the Moon and Mars, which we've had for at least almost 40 years on Mars, I would say. I know several people that have served there. And we have interstellar propulsion systems, which we got from the aliens. These breakaway civilizations, they don't give us anything back, but they take our products and our finances. They use them for their own purposes with the blessing of the military, but we get nothing in return. They're not planning on sharing any of this stuff with us ever, and they don't have to follow any laws after they're out of Earth. After they're off the Earth, there aren't any laws for them to follow. So the Nazis, the holdover Nazis who still survived after World War II and were imported into the U.S., they already had a base in Antarctica. They'd already contacted aliens, and they are already in control of at least some of these breakaway civilizations, and they use slaves. They abduct
Hmm.
people and use them as slaves for 20 years, and then they send them back in time 20 years when they return them to Earth. They're however old they were when they left, and they get to live their life over again with their memories erased.
How do we
It's
know? How do we know this is real? How do we know this isn't a pipe dream? It's not fiction.
well, one way we know it is that the military has lots of paperwork which has eventually been made public. They've got several very important whistleblowers who've gone public, and people like William Cooper and
Hmm.
William Tompkins, both very important whistleblowers. Those are people on the inside. Their reports are consistent. They're accurate. They are
How do you know they're accurate?
because I've spent the last 35 years checking all this stuff out myself, and I've somehow managed to get some connections which are, to my way of thinking,
Hmm.
they're dream connections. The guy who used to be my best friend was an electrical engineer he was contracted by NASA and the Air Force for over 20 years to. One of the things that he did was he reverse engineered alien tech that they found from crashes.
Wait a sec. How do you know that? Like, have you seen? Like this. It all sounds great, but it also sounds totally impossible.
Well, it sounds impossible, and it's one of those things where truth is really stranger than fiction.
Hmm.
There's no science fiction that can even compare to what's really going on. Um, my friend is who introduced me to his handler, who was a bird colonel at the time. He retired as a general later and went out golfing the next weekend and had a heart attack and died.
Who, your
So,
friend or the general?
well, they both had heart attacks and died. The general had a heart attack 4 days after he retired.
Hmm.
My friend had a heart attack when he was 52 and
Oh my
died.
gosh.
That they and the colonel. Well, I call him the colonel because he was a colonel
Yeah. Okay.
when I was doing all this stuff.
Sure.
He told me that he said when your friend
Hmm.
was brought into this program, he was told that at some point his usefulness to us will expire, and we pay him good money because he's got skills we need, but someday he won't be any more use to us, and when that day comes, he's either going to be set up in business at our expense, or he's going to be taken out back and shot. And he says if you don't agree to those terms, you never get into any of this classified technology. You'll never have another chance, and you'll be transferred laterally from then on. He said you have to be willing to take the bullet in order to get access to this stuff.
Is this information known by other governments of the world?
Well, some of it is because there have been alien sightings and crashes
Hmm.
in many different countries, of course. But um, one of the reasons that we had for the secrecy was that we were recovering advanced technology from a lot of these crashes, and we were we were actually taking it from other countries that had crashes with military force when we had to, and then paying them off later to pretend nothing happened. But they were actually acts of war,
Well, wait a
because
sec. Whoa,
we
wait,
didn't
hold on,
want
hold on here, hold on.
we didn't want that tech in the hands of rogue nations, let's say.
Okay, so which countries did we actually go to war with to take or to abscond with alien technology because we didn't want them to have the technology, and then after we had the technology to pacify everything and smooth it over, we paid them off?
Well, the only one I know for sure
Hello?
the only one I know for sure that happened
Hmm.
with was Brazil. Back in the 90s, there was an incident called the Varginha incident in Brazil, which made Roswell look like a small time thing.
Hmm.
There was a very rapidly moving alien spacecraft which crashed near a small town out in the jungle area, and it had several survivors, and they were seen by the local people. Two of them were captured, and they threw nets over them like they used to catch monkeys in the jungle. And they were small. They were not aggressive. They were crying and injured and screaming, and they weren't weren't aggressive toward the people at all, but they captured them in these nets, and the local militia apparently just shot one of them in the chest for no reason, fear, killed it, and we went down. We dropped paratroopers in there. We committed acts of war against the Brazilian military with our special forces in order to take possession of the crash site, and we purchased basically the one alien which was still alive. They took him to, he was injured. They took him to a medical facility, but they couldn't figure out how to remove its spacesuit to treat it. So they finally decided that they would try to burn it off with a torch. But they didn't realize that the suit itself was grown into the body. Once they put the suit on, they formed one interconnected unit, and the suit could never be removed again. And when they tried to cut the suit off, they accidentally killed this alien. The last I heard, the body was being stored in the basement of a secure medical facility in the basement of the University of the Americas in Panama. And we paid Brazil billions of dollars to pretend that that never happened, because it was totally acts of war, because we wanted exclusive access to that technology. And that crash is where all the nanotech came from. It's where we got the idea for molecular machinery, nanotech and stuff like that. There wasn't any of that before that crash occurred, which I believe was in 1998. It all came from there.
Interesting. How many different, I've got about a minute before I have to take my final break. So how many different crashes do you believe have happened on this planet within the last, let's say, 50 years?
Well, I don't think there's any way to know, because they cover them up so quickly and so effectively. Delta Force was formed just for the purpose of securing crash sites and keeping everybody else out of them. But worldwide, I would say there's probably been at least a few dozen crashes. And some of the alien ships which have crashed, they're not really crashes. We've brought them down. We discovered back in the late 40s that we could, if we turned our military radar up to full power, it would interfere with the navigation system of some of these ships and cause them to lose control and crash. And we brought some of them down that way on purpose.
All right, Derek, please stand by. We've got to take our final break. And Exo Nation, if you'd like to find out more about Derek Tyler, our guest this hour, visit his website at www.facebook.com/official Derek Tyler. Now, Derek has books that are available on Amazon.com as well. All you need to do is go to Amazon.com and then put in the search engine Derek Tyler. And we'll both be back as we wrap up this hour here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name's Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Explanation, Derek Tyler is our special guest this hour. He is an author, he is a writer, he is a researcher. His Facebook page is facebook.com/official Derek Tyler. And on his Facebook page, you can contact Derek directly. It also has a link to his Twitter page and his YouTube channel as well. Derek, what based on your research and your expertise, what happened at Roswell, New Mexico in 1947?
Well, what happened at Roswell is basically just what everyone thinks happened. There was a crash of a disk. Mm-hmm. It was a different race, not the classic gray ETs, but a different race, which is also known as the Greys, but they're a naturally occurring race, not a cyborg. And one of them was captured alive from the wreckage. He was kept as a prisoner, really. Mm-hmm. They called him a guest, but he was really a prisoner until he died a few years later. But he taught us how to communicate with the rest of his people, and it led to a secret illegal treaty being signed between us and an alien race or two, which basically we signed a treaty with the wrong side. We signed a treaty with hostile aliens, which basically traded away our people for technology. We gave them the permission to overfly our country whenever they wanted to, because we couldn't stop them anyway. Mm-hmm. We gave them permission to abduct our people and experiment on them and do what they wanted as long as they returned them home when they were done. which they sometimes do and not always. And in return, they promised that they would give us some military type technology and some other types of technology, which they've given us slowly over time, quite a bit of tech, but almost none of it's been shared with the public. Some that has are fiber optics, lasers, holograms, cloning. Those things were all alien originated techs. And you'll notice, if you remember Dolly the sheep, when they cloned Dolly the sheep 20 years ago or however long it was, you've never heard another word about cloning since then. Because you know what the difference between cloning a sheep and cloning a person is?
One's a sheep, the other's a person.
The size of the vat you use. There's no difference. And the military has been cloning people for decades, but they don't want that subject to come up with the public because they don't want any discussion or any restrictions to that, because they are cloning people all the time. And they use some of them for slaves. They use some of them for populating other planets that we have colonies on, which we do have some colonies on other worlds. And much of the population there are slaves, which are controlled by the military. It's not a democracy out in space at all.
Let me ask you, with all the information that you have and the whistleblowing that you do, have you ever been put under threat of harm if you keep on going?
Well, I was once back in the 90s. I started to write my first book back in the 90s, and one day I had a couple of guys show up at my door dressed in suits, and they claimed to be from the CIA. They said they were couriers, and they come to bring me a message saying, you know, we like that you're trying to help abductees, because I was trying to help abductees at the time too. They said we think it's a nice thing you're doing. It's past time somebody tried to do that. They said, but you sent some chapters of the book you're writing to some of your friends over email, and we intercepted them. And if you try to publish that information, people disappear all the time. They said, and you could be one of them, and they'd never find your body. And I surprised them. I laughed at them. I said, I know you can kill me if you want to, but you can't scare me into silence. You'll have to kill me. Nobody tells me what I can say or what I can write. And they said, you know, we're just here to give you a message. That's all. And they left. And after that, my agent would never speak to me again. And no one would publish my book. And it took me another 20 years to get it published.
Okay, I can't understand why the CIA would be the messenger, since they don't have jurisdiction within.
Well, I don't know that.
Wait a sec.
They really were from the CIA.
Well, you said they were CIA. I didn't.
That's what they said.
Did you see credentials?
Well, they did, but who knows if they're real or not? The government has fake IDs like you wouldn't believe. I don't know where they were from. I can't tell you where they were from.
All right. So let me go back to another point that you discussed. The bases on the moon. How come how come amateur astronomers who have the ability to see structures on the moon, craters on the moon, and so on and so forth, nobody's ever reported a structure on the moon?
Oh, actually they have. As I understand it, our bases are on the backside of the moon, so you can't really see them. But there have been structures photographed by astronauts, and the photos have leaked out later. And there are alien bases on the moon, and there are at least 2 human bases, as I understand it. I don't personally know anyone who has worked on the moon bases. I know several people who worked on the Mars base.
Okay.
And I think we have, as I understand it, 11 different bases on Mars, and we are allied with the Draconians there.
So if we already have bases on Mars, what's the sense of sending the Mars rovers to Mars? And you know, any flyby or any expedition that's gone to Mars has not turned up anything out of the ordinary.
It's propaganda. It's public relations. As the colonel told me back in the late 90s, he said, there will never be a manned mission to Mars or the moon in your lifetime that the public is aware of. Never again. He said, we can't take the risk of an accidental photograph getting through our airbrush team. And he says there's ruins all over. He said Mars is covered with ruins from a war there millions of years ago. There's apparently a ruined city in Cydonia near that famous Mars face. He said we can't take the chance that somebody will see a photo and will blow the whole cover. So he said, you'll occasionally hear about Mars missions being planned, but in the end, he said there'll always be something comes up that stops them. It'll be funding or technical problems, and also we've taken millions and millions of photos of the surface of Mars, but you've probably only seen about a dozen of them.
But does the public really need to see everything?
Well,
like
I don't think they do.
Like I'm sorry, well, looking at pictures of Mars certainly isn't in my top list of priorities.
Well, I don't think the public does need to see everything, but the point is that we're being lied to about this place. Did you know there's forests on the surface of Mars?
No, I didn't know that, but I'm certainly sure that there's going to be a number of scientists who always listen to the show who are going to be looking at them and seeing if, in fact, they are there, and if they're not, they're certainly going to let me know.
They're near the South Pole.
Okay.
Where there's I'll send you some pictures of them here on Skype.
No, don't, okay, thanks very much, and I'll certainly take a look at these later, and if you don't mind, I'll share them with our listeners as well.
Go ahead.
It looks like a picture of a pine tree forest in the middle of winter.
It does.
But
so
the oxygen.
But they're NASA images you can see on the.
Well, once again, anything can be spoofed these days, including NASA images.
Yeah.
Like I could easily take that. I could easily take that last picture you sent me, take off the borders, and insert a photo, and it'll have all the same properties as the NASA markings. Like that's
true.
Not proof.
That's true. Well, you can take it for whatever you think it's worth.
Oh, I want to believe. I really would like to believe. That's why I do this show. I want to get the answers out to the listeners.
I'll tell you something funny, sir. When I was a kid, I used to think the most marvelous thing in the world would be to get to have a conversation with a person from another world, and I imagined that I would ask them questions that only an alien could answer, and then I would listen to their wise answers. And as I grew up, I realized that things like that don't really happen, but somehow it did happen, and I've ended up speaking to someone from another world against all the odds, but it wasn't anything like I imagined it would be. It was gray aliens being an abduction, and all I was able to ever say was, "Oh God, please don't do that," twice. They never spoke back to me at all, and it made me end up wishing that I'd never even heard of aliens.
Wow.
It's a scary topic.
How many different alien races do you claim there are on this planet right now?
Well, I don't think any civilians really know the answer to that, but I sat down and tried to make a list of the ones that I have heard of and I think are reliably reported, and I think I could come up with 60 some off the top of my head. I've heard that that we're aware of well over 100. The military is, but of course they don't tell us about all of them, and the aliens apparently don't even tell the military about them. The colonel said one of the main ways they discover new alien races is they have to wait for one of their saucers to crash.
Well, unfortunately, Derek, the time has come when you and I must say so long. I want to thank you very much for joining us. And Exo Nation, if you'd like to get more information about Derek or send him some questions, visit his YouTube channel or chat with him via Twitter. Just go to his Facebook page at www.facebook.com/official Derek Tyler. That's www.facebook.com/official Derek Tyler. And I'm going to share with you, the X Zone Nation, the photos and the images that Derek has sent me during the course of this interview. And you be the judge. You tell me what you think, and we'll get the messages back. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Once again, if you'd like to get more information about our guest this hour, Derek Tyler, facebook.com/official DerekTyler.com. I'm Rob McConnell. This is the X Zone, and we're coming to you from our broadcast center and studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, on the X Zone Broadcast Network, iHeartRadio, Mutual Broadcast Network, Talkstar Radio, and of course, Simul Radio and Simul TV. Don't go away.